I was driving yesterday to Chick-fil-A with my kids, and I feel like I have this problem every time I drive now. Post-COVID, everyone forgot how to drive. I don't know if you've had this problem. Maybe it's just me, but I was behind 3 different people on the way to Chick-fil-A who had their blinkers on perpetually. I like the Jerry Seinfeld joke. It's an eventual left when old people do it. Just letting you give plenty of advance notice. But this happened to me 3 different times where someone had their blinker going, and I'm like, okay, are they really going to come? At one point, one person finally did and tried to sideswipe me on the highway. This happens to me every time. But it did get me thinking, and this is going to be a stretch of an analogy, so forgive me. But they were clueless, and I think Trump is a little like this. If we're using this blinker analogy, his followers try to pretend his blinker is a 4D chess move, that he's doing it on purpose. There's some genius behind it. I think the people on the other side, his detractors, quickly say that he's just lying about his intent to turn. But I think the truth is he's just mentally unaware that he left his blinker on. Again, I know it's a stretch of an analogy, so forgive me. But I do truly believe that his behavior of late, and really even looking back, is of a man who is just not well, maybe. And maybe we just didn't notice it because Biden was so clearly more unwell. But he can't even manage to do what's in his best interest right now, to win a presidential campaign. There is no 4D chess. And I'm starting to think that he believes the lies he says. I will explain why. And then I'm going to talk about the silver lining in Kamala Harris's flip-flopping on, just like about every issue she's ever taken a stand on. She's actually moderating to Trump's positions on a lot of it. And we'll end the show with a new non-political segment, because if you thought Snoop Dogg was great at the Olympics, imagine him being the hype man for his friend Dr. Dre. Let's do it. Welcome to The Homeless Conservative, a show about principled politics for exhausted citizens. I'm your host, Blake Fisher, and I'm a political junkie, so you don't necessarily have to be. Appreciate you being here. I know your time's valuable, so I really do appreciate it. So, as mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about Trump. And normally I don't love to spend a ton of time on these kind of things because I think most people have already made up their minds about Trump. They're either in the anti or the pro, and it's very hard to convince the people on the anti side that anything he ever does or says is correct or wise. And on the other side, you can't ever convince them that something he says is a lie or a bad idea or whatever. It's like, you're all in on one side or the other. I think that's what's so wrong with our politics. But I think we've been maybe talking about him the wrong way. And I'm starting to think that there are some cracks showing. So it's been really easy to overlook Trump over the last few months because things were going so poorly for Biden. It was easy not to pay attention to Trump. You go back to that June 27th debate, and all of the talk afterwards was about Biden's performance and how terrible it was. And every once in a while, someone would go, well, what about Trump? He lied several times. And it was like, look, that doesn't even matter when we're talking about, does this other guy have the mental capacity to be able to be the president for another 4 years? And so it kind of got overshadowed. It's like, Trump actually didn't have a great debate performance, in my opinion, on June 27th. I think if he would have been up against almost anyone else, it wouldn't have been that great for him. But it obviously soared above what Biden did. And so we've been paying attention to that. Then you have, of course, the assassination attempt. And other than Trump's instinct to stand up and pump his fist and implore his fans to fight, we really weren't talking about him. We were talking about the failure. It didn't really give him the bump. We even go into the Republican convention. And so it's been easy to not pay attention to Trump, the person, because it was just all the events going on around him. We were talking about Biden. We were talking about the assassination attempt. We were talking about the unity on display at the Republican National Convention. We did talk a little bit about his speech because we wanted to expect something from it. In the first 30 minutes, as we've talked about, was pretty on point. And then he just rambled and went to the same thing. And it's clear that Trump is not a changed person post the assassination. He's the same person. He's even admitted as much. He might be meaner. So anyway, it's just like no one has been talking about that. So I often talk about how Trump has policies that aren't conservative, but that's not necessarily an argument that the Trump lovers care about. And honestly, I don't know that anyone cares about policy at all right now, as we sort of talked about last week. It's just not, it seems like everyone's voting on feelings right now. And so I'm not sure that I wish policies mattered more. Unfortunately, it's clear that they don't, because Kamala Harris is not bringing out any policy ideas really, other than she's moderating or trying to moderate, or her campaign is at least telling us that. We actually don't hear it from her mouth necessarily. So we've not been talking about Trump. But this swap out, when Biden left the race and now Harris is in there, has been clearly not great for Trump in lots of different ways. But I think mostly in the way that we're seeing sort of his visceral reaction to it, and he can't get out of his own way against an opponent who should be much easier than he's making it be to fight against. Okay. So first, let's start about this. Maybe he's not a liar. I've called him a liar. Lots of people talk about his lies all the time. We fact check him all the time. We say he lies, he lies, he lies, he lies. I am more and more convinced. I don't know. We know that Donald Trump says things that are provably false all of the time. The only thing I can generally get people to admit as much is, well, he might lie about his crowd size, but let's just go back in time. I know we're talking about Trump the man right now in 2024, but let's go back to 2017, right after being inaugurated, and he sends his press secretary, Sean Spicer, out to lie about his crowd size. He says, we had much bigger crowds than Obama, biggest crowd size ever, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, look at the crowd size if you're watching. If you're not watching, I'll put the link in the show notes. This is a side-by-side. On the left is Donald Trump's crowd size for his first inauguration, and on the right is Obama's. It's not even close. There's 3 times as many people at the Obama one. So why would someone lie about something so easily proven false? I hear people on the left and just people that don't like Trump often say, well, this is just so he can lay the groundwork for his people will believe anything. And so if he can lie about this, that way he can lie about anything. I think we give him way too much credit. I think he might actually believe this stuff. So he lies about stuff every day like this. Crowd size. He exaggerates hyper superlatives like the worst ever, or the best in history, or the worst in history, or I was the first person ever. It's always superlative. He never hedges on anything with any sort of like, I don't want to call it humility. It's just he thinks that everything he does is the best. Everything anyone he doesn't like is the worst ever in history. And I've said, I don't think that either he or Biden were the worst presidents in the history of the country. So for either one of them to say that about the other one, I think is hyperbole, okay? But some of these are like big lies with real consequences. Obviously, it doesn't matter if he lies about his crowd size. The press is going to be all over it. They're going to debunk it, and people are going to choose, I guess, to believe what they want to believe. I don't know how you could look at that picture and believe that his crowd size was bigger. He just did this again this week, talking about that his crowd size was bigger than Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, the March on Washington. It's ridiculous. Again, you can look at pictures and you can see that it's not the case. But he has this ego that has to be the best and the biggest ever. And so some of his lies had real consequences. He obviously didn't like that he lost the 2020 election, and so he lied about stealing that election. And yes, he did lie. We have no evidence at all that the election was stolen. And I have this argument with people a lot because people go, well, yeah, but you got to say there was at least something suspicious. But look, here's the thing. The lies that people were told in 2020 by Trump and his team and the news, like on Newsmax and Fox News and OAN and the likes of them, we've got all this evidence, mountains of evidence, but didn't really happen because look, True the Vote, a lot of people don't know this because you would never see this on Fox News, but the group True the Vote had to concede in court in Georgia that it had zero evidence that there was any election fraud in the state. Because the state of Georgia sued them because they were saying all this stuff like, and they were like, well, okay, show us the evidence. You got to bring the evidence to court. We want to investigate it if there's actually evidence of fraud. And they had to admit, we actually don't have any. That seems like a problem. And you probably have heard of the 2000 Mules documentary, Dinesh D'Souza. You probably also don't know this if you only paid attention to Fox News or OAN or Newsmax or Breitbart or whatever, is that film has been pulled from distribution. It's not on the website anymore because they got sued for defamation by one of the people that they say is one of these mules that did ballot harvesting. So they're trying to cover their own butts now because there's money on the line. So they've pulled all that quietly. There's not a press release. But they've quietly pulled all of it, and they have apologized to the person who is suing them, saying, so the point is, that's not true either. They've got no evidence. They had all this evidence in this document. It's ridiculous. It's not true at all. But the truth is, most MAGA people will never know that those two things happened because the sources they read or watch will never admit that. They'll never do the story about True the Vote, going to court and saying, we don't have any evidence that anything happened. And keep in mind, they're alleging that thousands of people did ballot harvesting, or that the voting machines were rigged. There was a hand recount in Georgia. It was not stolen. And then we get January 6th after that. So there are real consequences sometimes to his lies. And sometimes he says things like this, and we're told not to take him seriously, right? Or take him seriously, not literally. And his followers are sort of implying he's not serious about like the threat or the lie when he's caught in an obvious lie. And we use it as a sign, like on the people that don't like him, to show his unfitness for office. And so for example, like this level of disregard for the Constitution, where he said, this is a Truth Social thing that he put out. So with the revelation of massive and widespread fraud and deception in working closely with the big tech companies and DNC and the Democratic Party, do you throw the presidential election results of 2020 out and declare the rightful winner, or do you have a new election? None of this is constitutional, by the way. A massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. So he claims still that he never said that we should, abandon the Constitution, but he's left. This is still up on his Truth Social thing. Allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. No, that is not how this works. I think that's dangerous. I think that's disqualifying. I think a disregard for the Constitution is disqualifying. To be fair, I think it's disqualifying for the way Biden treats the Constitution. Democrats don't get a say that Donald Trump doesn't care about the Constitution, because they don't either. Every chance that Biden had to subvert the Constitution and do something that he knew was illegal, like an executive order to forgive student loans, for example, he did it, even though previously he'd said he knew it was illegal. I think that's impeachable and removable. That's not, you put your hand on the Bible and raise your hand and say you're taking an oath to uphold the Constitution and protect it, and then you sign executive orders that you know are illegal and unconstitutional. That's the same thing. I think both are dangerous. But maybe everyone is wrong about why Trump lies or how he lies. Because I know what he's saying isn't true, but I'm not necessarily convinced that he's actually lying, because maybe he actually believes all this stuff. I think what he's doing, and I think there's plenty of evidence to show this, he's starting with a conclusion. Everyone loves me. The country is for me. I'm popular. I'm a winner. Whatever that lie is, or not lie, I guess the belief. And he works backwards from that and then gives explanations for how it might appear that that's not the case. So, for example, if everyone loves me, if the country is more for me than against me, then my crowd sizes must be bigger than my opponents. And, that was true when Biden was in the race. Biden wasn't drawing crowds. Biden wasn't really going in front of crowds very often. And so, it's a confirmation bias. It's like, oh, I'm popular because I have more people at my rallies. But all of a sudden, Harris is like a shot in the arm for the Democrats and the general election public. And she's got these huge crowds now. And his excuse for her big crowds are that it must be artificial intelligence. He claims that this crowd, I'm going to show a video of, is artificial intelligence. And here's the video. And I know if you're listening, you're not gonna be able to see it, but I'll put a link to it. It's pretty clear that that's real. There's no AI involved here. That's a huge crowd in front of Air Force Two as she and Walz arrived. And, but Trump can't believe that she might be pulling people in big crowds. And so he goes to, it must be AI. So here's my question. Do you think that that is a lie? Or do you think that he's working backwards from an insane theory that it's not possible for her to have large crowds? So now I've got to find an explanation for how she has large crowds, and it must be AI. That makes no sense. And this person is not well if you believe that. And if you're saying these kind of things, like I said, lying about a policy position or lying about an opponent, this is pretty normal in politics. Politicians lie all the time. They lie about their previous positions on stuff. They lie about, they massage the truth all the time is what we would maybe say. We know politicians lie. We know Donald Trump lies. I just don't think that he's lying for any sort of strategic reason. I think that it's because he has to lie to himself and to believe the things he believes about himself. I think his ego and his narcissism are so all encompassing that he has to make up these kind of crazy excuses. But, you can look at that video. You can look at these crowd sizes that Harris is bringing. And there is a real excitement behind her. Honestly, because I think that most people just desperately didn't want Biden and Trump rematch again. And they would like anyone else coming in to that. Now, will crowds turn into votes? I don't know. We'll see. It's still early in this. Polls certainly look like they're swinging towards her. The problem is Trump is so obsessed with the fact that she is popular and that people are showing up to her campaign rallies and stuff that it's driving him crazy. I think that he's not mentally well. So I think that he just believes things that once he believes something that is observably untrue, what happens is the people around him double down on it. He's famous now for getting rid and firing anyone and getting rid of anyone from his inner circle that doesn't tell him what he wants to hear. So 2020, he says the election is stolen. And I think he was kind of laying the path for that in the lead up to it. But you saw in the lead up to the 2020 election when other, administration officials or something would be asked, they're like, no, he's not, he'll respect the election results and blah, blah, blah. And he's just making sure that, he wants to make sure that things are fair and everything is, above board. Okay. But then afterwards, as he starts saying that, if someone like Bill Barr came to him and said, we did investigate it, there was no fraud at a level that could have swung the election, you're gone. I mean, he actually, I think, resigned. But the point is, he just eliminated the people that told him what he didn't want to hear. And then other people, like Sidney Powell, would come feed him even more like explanations for his belief. So he starts with the belief the election was stolen because there's no other way I could have possibly lost because I'm very popular. Then people start coming to him and saying, look, what probably happened is the dictator in Venezuela hacked these Dominion voting machines and they were counting Biden's votes as 1.5 votes and yours as 0.75 votes. And that's how this happened. He goes, yeah, that's probably what happened. That's not a well person. That's not a sane person that I trust with the presidency of the United States. That's not someone I trust to run the executive branch. If you are that gullible, right? And so that's what happens is that he just feeds down this wormhole and he cannot get out of it because he gets rid of anyone that possibly disagrees with him. So, this is crazy behavior. It's not lying necessarily because I think he actually believes it, but that means he's a lunatic. And I'm not trying to be, I don't know, controversial or it's just like I look at the things he talks about, I look at the way he lies, and I can't believe that there's any strategy here because the clear strategy to beat Kamala Harris right now is to hit her on some issues that are broadly unpopular with the general public. The economy. People did not like Biden's economy. They did not like Bidenomics. Even in polls right now, they're saying they hope that Harris swings from it. So even the people that are enthusiastic about Harris are hoping she moves away from Biden in that regard. So that's not been popular. She's in the administration right now. It should be easy to hit her on things like the border, something Biden put her in charge of as the border czar, which we've had that whole discussion too. He should be hitting her on these issues that are broadly unpopular, and her position and her administration's positions on them are unpopular with the country right now. And you don't have to get into the weeds on policy discussions, but you can at least hit her on the stuff that, hey, you guys remember inflation? Remember how the prices of everything have gone up? Well, that's Biden and Harris's administration. They're partly responsible for that. So why should you let her be in charge again? He can't do it though. He's got to go on the attack of saying things like, oh, well, she wasn't black until she decided it was beneficial to her. Why even go there? Who do you think that gets you? I know you've got your base already if you're Trump. I'm just talking this from a purely strategic standpoint. Who does that get you? Does that get you one vote? I don't think it does. And this does appear to be a purely base strategy election for both parties. He's attacking Republicans right now, though. So if the goal of the base strategy is that we got to get our entire base to show up, and we got to get more of our base to show up than their base, and then we'll let the people in the middle, hold their nose and vote for someone, but we're not trying to get them. And yet he's attacking Republicans right now. Right now, he's attacking Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, because Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, did not go along with his stolen election thing in 2020. So he's mad about that, and he has a grudge against them because, again, they must be in on it. Because if the election was stolen and they're not working with me, they must be my enemy, right? Instead of just maybe they've looked into it and there's no evidence that it happened. Governor Kemp has a 5% approval rate right now in Georgia. 65% of all Georgians approve of his work as governor. Okay? That's someone that would be good to have on your side if you're in a state that is a swing state and kind of a must-win for Trump. Trump loses Georgia again, very unlikely that he can win. And yet, he's attacking that governor. Instead of attacking Kamala Harris, he's attacking the Republican governor of Georgia. Tell me how that's 4D chess. Tell me how that's a smart strategy. It's crazy. He's a lunatic. I don't see any other way around it. He's, of course, lying about Brian Kemp. He's lying about Brad Raffensperger. But that doesn't matter. I think he actually believes the lies. I think he actually thinks Brian Kemp is part of the deep state or whatever and stole the election from him in 2020. But he needs Brian Kemp. He needs the 64% of people who approve of him in that state that he has to win. But he won't do it. By the way, Trump's favorability in Georgia is a net -1. It's 47% favorable, 48% unfavorable. So he's way less popular in Georgia than Brian Kemp is. He needs Brian Kemp's voters and people. And yet he's going to make enemies. Why? He needs this state and he won't do it. But he's not attacking Democrats. He's attacking Republicans. It's lunacy. Or how about him not knowing how many countries have nuclear weapons in this 2-hour... Oh, God, I listened to it. You don't need to. It was not that interesting. It's the same old. He and Elon Musk on X, full of technical difficulties, which he made fun of Ron DeSantis for, by the way, for announcing his campaign on Twitter, which I also made fun of him for. Why are you doing an audio-only thing where in a land of video? Doesn't make any sense to me. But he decided, well, Elon Musk is a friendly place. I'll go over to X, and I'm so desperate for his love that we'll do this 2-hour thing. It had lots of technical problems, and he had this lisp. By the way, if you hear about the lisp, I think the lisp was an audio problem. It's actually very easy to give someone a lisp on a microphone. You just do a de-esser at the frequency. It's a thing that accidentally happens a lot if you don't know what you're doing. I thought about actually doing it just to actually show you, but I don't want to deal with that. So I think the lisp was just an audio problem. I don't think he actually had a lisp, but he was slurring words and stuff. I mean, if you were only paying attention to Trump, or if Biden had said the things in the way Trump says them, people would be all over it. It's just less noticeable because I think if you mute the volume, Trump seems altogether there. But then if you listen to what he says, or if you actually transcript it out, it's very, very bizarre, the things he's saying. But either way, he does this 2-hour thing. At one point, he's talking about climate change not being... Global warming is not the problem. It's potential nuclear warming. If we have a nuclear war, and obviously a nuclear war would be very bad. We agree. But he rattles off that, 5 countries have nuclear weapons, but there's 9 countries that have nuclear weapons. I would like the guy that has been president of the United States already and is running for it again to know how many countries have nuclear weapons. That seems like some day one stuff. He does not care about governing. He does not care about foreign policy. He cares about his own ego. And I just think that that's one of those things that we would go, that should be alarming that he doesn't know how many countries have nuclear weapons. That bothers me. But this is really this is the part of his rambling that really makes me go, okay, this is actually a problem. He's maybe crazy. This is his new theory about what will happen. I'll give it to you in his own words.
Coup. We had a coup. That was the first coup in the history of our country. And it was very successful. He said, okay, I'll leave. If that's what you want, I'll leave. And now he's seeing what the competition is. I hear he's going to make a comeback at the Democrat convention. He's going to walk into the room and he's going to say, I want my presidency back. I want another chance to debate Trump. I want another chance.
That's talking about Biden. He now said this a couple times. He thinks Biden's going to show up at the Democrat convention, which is next week. And he's going to be like, I changed my mind again. I'd actually like to be the nominee. First of all, this is crazy because this is already sealed up. Actually, Kamala Harris already has the delegate count. They did it virtually. So she already has them locked up. This is just essentially a party for TV next week. That's not going to happen. But he's so, like I said, that's lunacy. I can't explain it any other way than like, do you want that guy? And this is me talking to, I don't know who I'm talking to here. I think what I'm talking to is the reasonable people I know and I've talked to that go, well, when it's between Harris and Trump, I can't vote for Harris because she has really bad progressive ideas. And I agree. Harris is a bad candidate. Harris has terrible ideas she's trying to moderate on, which we'll get to in a second. But Donald Trump is not fit to be the president of the United States. And I'm not talking about morally. I'm not talking about, I don't know, whatever, all the he tweets too much or he's mean or whatever. No, I'm not talking about any of that stuff. I'm talking about a guy that believes Joe Biden's going to show up next week and take back the crown so that he can debate Biden again instead of Harris, or that he can be winning again. Because he just doesn't believe that it's possible that someone like Harris could potentially win this election. And instead of actually doing the smart things that his campaign staff is telling him to do, he cannot get on message. Do you trust this person to be in charge of the entire executive branch? Do you trust him with the nuclear codes? Do you trust him with foreign policy? I know he says he'd end the war in Ukraine on day one, like in 24 hours, I'd have it solved. I think he believes that he could do that. But I think he's a lunatic for thinking that. And if you think he actually believes this stuff, you've got to admit that he's crazy. There's no other explanation for saying something like Biden's going to show up next week and come riding in on a horse or whatever and take back the nomination from Kamala Harris. It's not going to happen for sure. And it's delusional. And I cannot vote for someone that's that crazy. I just can't do it. Kamala Harris is a politician. She's a liar. She has bad positions. She's untrustworthy. But I don't think she's actually insane. I'm not saying I'm voting for Kamala Harris, by the way. And his campaign and Republicans on TV are begging him to get back on message because any normal candidate could hit Kamala Harris hard on her being the current VP with an administration that people are not happy with. They're not happy with the economy, as I said. They're not happy with the border. And J.D. Vance has actually been doing a better job the last couple of weeks than he did. Kind of his rollout was pretty rough, but he's done a little bit better. I liked his little thing on being on the tarmac and basically standing in front of Air Force Two in front of the press and be like, hey, I'll take questions since you guys are probably bored because Kamala won't take any questions. But like Trump can't get on that message. He just is saying her crowds must be AI. That will not help him at all win the election because it sounds crazy. But the thing is, he cannot stay on message because he doesn't care about the message. He only cares about his ego, and there's no strategy for him. It is all feelings. It's whatever he feels right now. And right now, he feels like Harris can't possibly be popular, and so he's had to come up with some sort of reason for that. And so his reason is AI, or her changing her race, or it's a Democratic Party coup. It's not a coup. It's not what happened. And people often say that Trump cares about the everyman. I always hear that. Well, he cares about real people. I've always disagreed with this because I think Trump only cares about one person. He cares about Donald Trump, and he is pure, uncut narcissism. He will throw anyone or any cause under the bus if it means he wins. He's done it with lots of people. He's done it with lots of causes. He keeps kind of going back and forth on abortion depending on what his feelings are that day and what someone's telling him is popular with the general public. And I know some of that goes with politics. That is generally what happens. People go to the right if they're in the Republican Party in the primary, and then they have to moderate a little bit in the general election. We've sort of abandoned that after Obama. It seems like everyone's just gone for these base elections, which there's not a lot of evidence actually works. But he will abandon anyone that turns on him. He'll abandon any issue. Does not care about issues. He only cares about himself. And he was on top of the world and not even having to beat up Biden because the press was doing the work for him post the debate on June 27th. And I think he actually listened to his people because he was loving sitting back and watching everyone attack Biden and say the things that his campaign and the Republicans have been saying for a long time, that Biden was unfit. It's funny how that switched now. Now he's not saying that. Now he's saying it was a coup. Now, if you noticed, it's totally changed. He's now saying that Democrats forced him out, that poor Biden just got forced out only because he was losing. Now, I do think it was largely because he was losing. And I think that there is absolutely going to be there's going to be further distrust in the media because of that, and the Democratic Party, because it wasn't that they actually thought he was too old to do it, even though they did feel that way. They were lying about his abilities, but they covered it up because they thought he could still win. Once it was proven that he couldn't win, then they forced him out. I think that's actually at least somewhat of a worthy thing, but Trump's now pretending like Biden is all there and that this was just like a mean thing and it was a coup. That's not what he was saying a few months ago. And so now people are noticing that Trump's doing fewer events. He's doing way fewer events than he did in 2016. Obviously, 2020 was a different time because we were in COVID. His speech is sometimes slurred. He seems low energy comparatively. And now that focuses on him, it infuriates him. And he just got lucky the last few months that none of the focus was on him. So I think there's only two options here. He's either a liar or he's crazy. I used to think he was just a liar, but as time goes on, I am more and more on the lunatic side of that answer. But I think you have to admit it's one of those two things. But if, we just got to ask ourselves, like, is it worth having someone like that in charge of the executive branch? I don't think so. Trump is the reason that Kamala Harris will get away with a campaign free of hard questions or tough policy positioning because it's working. Why would she do an interview? She's rising in the polls. She's raising tons of money. People are showing up to the same stump speech that she makes, the exact same teleprompter speech at every one of these rallies. Exact same thing. And you know what? They've realized they've hit a sore spot. They're poking fun at his crowd sizes. They're calling him and Vance weird. And Trump is taking the bait and acting weirder. Jonathan Chait at New Yorker says, or New York Magazine says, losing to Harris is making Trump crazier, and being crazy is making him lose. The Trump death spiral. So far it's been true for the last few weeks. If he doesn't get out of that death spiral, he's definitely going to lose in November. But I just don't think there's any evidence that Trump can stay on message with what his campaign wants to say. He couldn't do it at the convention speech after nearly being assassinated. We all thought that might be a thing that could change him. It didn't. Apparently, almost dying cannot change him. So he's not going to change. If that didn't change him, nothing will. He cannot handle there being excitement about any other candidate. And to be fair, that's all he's ever known, because the truth is there wasn't a ton of excitement in 2016 in the Republican primary. Obviously, Hillary Clinton was very disliked. Not a lot of excitement on her side. Not a lot of people weren't excited about Biden. They were just like, hey, he's not Trump, and that's why he won in 2020. So this is the first time he's actually been against someone that has crowds and some excitement and some energy behind. And I think he doesn't know what to do with it. This is what he always does when he feels threatened. He lashes out. He did it at Nikki Haley. He did it at Ron DeSantis when it looked like they could potentially. Now, there just never was enough energy behind them, but he certainly lashed out when he thought there might be. And then once he realized they weren't threats, he kind of like stopped talking about them. It's no longer interesting. Did this with RFK Jr. too. At one point, RFK Jr. was taking more votes away from Biden, so he praised him. He loved him. And then the second it was obvious that RFK Jr. was stealing maybe some of his base, he starts attacking him as the most crazy, liberal, far-left person ever. So which is it? Liar or lunatic? You can figure that out. So if you're not convinced, let's say you're right, he's at least a liar, okay? And so is Kamala. So at least they're on even ground at that point. I just think that I don't think this is going to go super well for him. And we can certainly complain about the media's kid glove treatment of Kamala. I think that's totally fair. I think it's really gross. It's going to further people's distrust in the media. There's no doubt about that. But it only works because Trump lets it. Because they lied about Biden too. But no one bought the lie because we could see with our own eyes. And we can see these clips of Kamala in the past, and she's not good at this. In National Review, Jeffrey Blahar, who is like absolutely one of my favorite cranky writers right now, he writes about CNN's Caitlin Collins on Colbert this week. This was actually just kind of a funny thing. I should have got the video, but he says, this was Caitlin Collins from CNN on Colbert's show, and this is Jeffrey Blahar talking about it. As Collins was talking, Colbert interjected as if to bolster her credibility. I know you guys are objected over there that you just report the news as it is, and the audience would not allow Colbert to finish his sentence as it descended into peals of sarcastic laughter. He meant it sincerely, and they took it as an obvious joke whose punchline was, of course you are all shameless partisan hacks. Colbert grimaces at the unintended response and insists on correcting the audience. That wasn't supposed to be before realizing that he accidentally revealed to the world that not even his own viewers are willing to board this ship of fools. Which makes one wonder, is it really America that has gone crazy or merely America's media class? And I think that's absolutely a great example of the media is trying their best to elevate Kamala Harris. They did their best to do it with Biden, and then they did their best to get rid of Biden once they realized he couldn't win. But I don't think generally Americans are buying this stuff. So that's the good news. And sure, the crowds are showing up for Kamala, and they're buying some of it, but most voters just desperately wanted someone other than Trump or Biden. And they got that in Harris. And this goes back to the thing I've said many times. Nikki Haley was absolutely right when she said the first party to replace their 80-year-old nominee is gonna win the presidency. And she's even on record saying, you're gonna have a woman president in 2025. It's either gonna be me, this is when she was still in the primary, or it's gonna be Kamala Harris, because Biden's not gonna be the nominee. So you're either, or she was also implying that maybe if Biden was the nominee, he would die in office and you're gonna get Kamala Harris one way or another. And she's right. At this point, you're getting either Kamala Harris or Trump. And the way the polls have been moving, right now, it seems like it's Trump's race. It was Trump's race to lose. Biden drops out. It's edging towards basically a statistical tie. We could get into the weeds of all the polls and stuff, but she's gaining in all the swing states. She's gaining popularity nationwide, and it doesn't matter that she's a big flip-flopper. But that does bring me to the silver lining in Harris's campaign flip-flops, because she's done this a bunch already. In 2019, she was for banning fracking. She was for confiscating guns without congressional action. She was for Medicare for all. She was for defunding the police. She was for a federal jobs guarantee. She was for the Green New Deal. And over again, we've now been told by her campaign, not by her, of course, because she won't do interviews and she won't do media. She will talk to the media off the record on her plane. They have this nice little club thing going on. But her campaign tells us she has none of those positions anymore. The reason I think that's good news as a conservative is that her flip-flops are all towards conservative policies. All of them. It's not just that she's moderating towards the middle. She's actually stealing Trump's policy ideas right now. Trump came up with this no tax on tips, which, let's be totally honest, is just a play for Nevada. Nevada's kind of a swing state. There's a lot of service workers in Nevada who live on tips, and this is a play to get those workers. And not that there are lots of those across the entire country too, but Nevada is definitely on the radar of why they're mentioning this. She's adopting the policy now, which is hilarious because she was the deciding vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which had extra money for the IRS to create new ways to go after people not paying their taxes on tips. They created a whole system. She was the deciding vote. And yeah, I know she didn't even read the thing. I'm sure she just was told by Biden, you got to go sign that. You got to go vote. She's the tiebreaker, and she was the tiebreaker vote on it. And so it's hilarious to me that a couple years ago, she goes, well, we're going to let the IRS go after these people that are not paying taxes on their tips. And now she's saying, I'm going to write a law that says no taxes on tips. This is just pandering, and it's expected. But it's hilarious to me that she's stealing Trump's policy ideas. That should say something about the fact that the country is obviously not super far left progressive like media and like the loudest people on the left will tell you. The lesson learned in 2016 from Bernie Sanders almost beating Hillary Clinton should have been Don't run someone like Hillary Clinton that's a terrible candidate and people don't like. People just were attracted to Bernie Sanders compared to Hillary Clinton. Everyone took the lesson that we got to go super far left. That's what did it. And I think it's clear that that wasn't what worked, because that didn't work in 2020. Biden, the normal candidate, although Biden then continually capitulates to those people on the far left. And I think it's wrong. So obviously people don't trust Kamala Harris because she's flip-flopping on all this stuff, and you don't know, is she really going to moderate, or is she going to govern like the super progressive that she claimed she was in 2019? And the truth is we don't know, and you shouldn't trust her. But I think it's at least a little sliver of a silver lining that she's moderating to literally Republican positions on a lot of this stuff. So I think there's a little bit of that silver lining there. So this is something that people have clearly not been happy with Biden for, is his lurch to the far left. It's part of the reason he has done so badly. He's certainly the Democratic Party is doing terribly with working class voters in general. And I think it's fair to point out that Kamala Harris is moderating right now, and that she probably will do the exact same thing that Biden does and just like cave to the far left of her base. I think that's totally fair to point out, but it's at least nice that she's taking some Republican positions. Noah Rothman in National Review brings up the question, how can Republicans bring attention to Kamala Harris's new positions that she's essentially stealing from them without, bringing the positive attention to her, since they also like these positions? So this is what he said about the Bush campaign specifically in 2004. It wasn't just that the Bush campaign stayed relentlessly on message to the point that the narrative it retailed broke through the mainstream media's bulwark. It was that the message punctured the image of Kerry that his campaign sought to promote, that of a steady hand of a sober executor of America's national security priorities abroad. And this is Bush saying, it's been a little tough to prepare for the debate because he keeps changing his positions, especially on the war, Bush said in September 2004, not with bitterness, but with a chuckle. Indeed, Kerry could spend 90 minutes debating himself. The charge stuck, and with that went the utility of Kerry campaign's claim that its candidate was ready to serve. I think this would work with Kamala Harris. I think that they could go after her for being, look, she's flip-flopping so much, she's not ready to serve. She's the same gaffe machine that she's been for forever. But that would take Trump staying on message like George W. Bush could and his entire campaign did in 2004. Do you think there's any chance he can do that? I do not. All right, finally, we're going to have a new segment here. I don't know what we're going to call it. I need a name for it. If you got any good name suggestions, shoot me an email at blake@thehomelessconservative.com. We'll call it an apolitical palate cleanser of sorts, because I really do believe, if you can't tell by the shelves behind me, politics aren't the only thing I love. I love Batman. I love music. I love records. I love all sorts of things. I love the Olympics for sure. I don't know if you're an Olympic person. Our family is into it. And I'm excited about the 2028 Olympics being in America. Should be good. Won't have to have the time delay of watching stuff in the morning. But what would be better than Snoop Dogg at the Olympics? Because if you didn't watch Snoop Dogg at the Olympics, I heard he got paid $500,000 a day by NBC. Don't know if that's confirmed or not. But the only thing that would be better than Snoop Dogg at the Olympics would be Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre at the Olympics. So the legendary producer and hip hop's first billionaire, Dr. Dre, wants to compete in the archery section of the Los Angeles Games in 2028. He told Entertainment Tonight he is dead ass serious. That's right. He said dead ass serious about competing in archery. He actually has been doing this since he was in middle school. He picked it back up several years ago, and he says he practices at 90 feet while the Olympic qualifications are done at 77 feet. I think this would be amazing. The guy discovered Snoop Dogg and Eminem and Kendrick Lamar. He's one of the best producers ever. He started Beats with Jimmy Iovine, sold it to Apple. He's a billionaire. He's got plenty of platinum records. So let's see if he can get a medal in the Olympics on his home turf in Los Angeles. I think it would be awesome to see that. If you like Snoop Dogg in the equestrian events in the Olympics this year, imagine him like holding Dre's quiver while Dre's shooting arrows and winning gold medals. I think it'd be awesome. I want it to happen really, really badly. Anyway, that's it for this episode of The Homeless Conservative. I know your time is really valuable, so I really do appreciate you spending some of it here with me. One thing you can do that seriously helps me out a ton is you can rate or like or subscribe to the show wherever you watch or listen. Most of the links I discussed are in the show notes if you want to check them out. Most of the articles I talked about. as well as links to all the various places you can find me. So thank you again for being here. I will catch you next time.